go. So here we are. We were making salsa, and we have our cucumbers and our peppers, spicy peppers and bell peppers. We have our seasonings and our herbs in there. And I've put a little bit of cider vinegar in and a little bit of sugar. So everything is in there. Oh, and a little bit of garlic. We've got all of the things in there. And I'm going to stir it up. And that is your salsa. So, like I said, if you want to make it in the food processor, do drain some of the juice from the cucumbers because you will break the cell wall of the vegetable itself. So doing it like this, you're not breaking the cell wall if you're dicing up the vegetables, and so there's less juice. And it is a little bit, I think I actually misread the recipe. So I put in 3/4 of a cup of cider vinegar. I'll add more cucumbers later. Don't you worry about that. But if you notice, it looks a little bit juicy. That's why, because it's only 1/4 of a cup of cider vinegar, actually. And yes, I will be sending you the correct version of the recipe after the class is over. Maybe I got a little flustered by the Zoom link not working all of a sudden. All right, but in the interim, our cherry tomatoes have cooked down, and we are ready for cherry tomato pesto. So the other really beautiful thing that happens when you cook down the tomatoes is that you get a little bit of caramelization, and so you might notice some little brown spots on the tomatoes, and that is just fine. That's actually delicious. This is a really simple recipe, the cherry tomato pesto. So it's got only a few ingredients, but they are crucial ingredients. It's got a couple of cloves of garlic, which are pre-crushed. And one of the reasons for pre-crushing the garlic is because I found this out in this great book, Eating on the Wild Side. And if you are eating garlic raw, then it doesn't matter if you pre-crush it. But if you are planning on cooking the garlic or having the garlic get like really hot if you're sauteing it, there are a lot of phytonutrients in garlic, and if you pre-crush it, then those nutrients are more available to your body. They get sort of diminished in the cooking process, but for some reason, if you let the garlic sit for about 10 minutes before you add it to something hot, then all of these amazing phytonutrients get even more amazing. So I'm putting my garlic in. I'm going to go ahead and turn my tomatoes off. I'm going to add my Parmesan cheese. And a little side note on pre-grated Parmesan cheese. Make sure you taste it first, because sometimes you buy pre-grated Parmesan cheese and it either doesn't have any flavor at all, or they've put some kind of like citric something in it to preserve it, and it tastes gross. So I recommend that, it doesn't matter what brand you get or whatever, but do taste it first to make sure that you're not ruining your pesto by using yucky Parmesan. All right, so then we're going to put in some salt and some olive oil. And that is how simple it is. Now, when you get the recipe, you might notice I'm putting in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. That's because I made a double batch of this. When you get the recipe, it's going to call for 2 cups of cherry tomatoes, and I used 4 cups of cherry tomatoes, and that is because I happen to have a ridiculous amount of cherry tomatoes right now, which is not a bad thing. One of the ways that I thought about the Southern Harvest Cookbook when I was writing it was how to use up summer bounty, how to use up vegetables that were coming in fresh and so delicious, and you want to use all of them, and you don't want any of them to go to waste. So some of my recipes use quite a quantity of one particular fruit or vegetable, and that is the case with this pesto. Okay, so at this point, you can. Oh, and if you happen to be dairy free, there are some good versions of Parmesan cheese out there that are dairy free. So please experiment with that. And also, you can use this same method and just leave out the Parmesan. You don't have to have Parmesan in there. You can just cook down the tomatoes a little bit more because the Parmesan cheese does absorb some liquid. But you can cook down the tomatoes a little bit more and leave out the cheese, and you will still have a delicious pesto-like sauce. But if you do not have a blender or a stick blender, Amy and I were talking earlier, and this is both of us agree that this is one of our favorite utensils or gadgets, I guess, in the kitchen. But if you don't have one, you can use a potato masher or a mortar and pestle, or just like a big spoon and mash up the tomatoes. But it is really nice to have some way of blending them. You don't have to use a stick blender for this. You can scrape this pesto saucy stuff into a blender or food processor, and you can just blend it up in one of those as well. So you don't have to have the exact utensil that I am using. But it's nice because I don't get another pot here. This is not a commercial for stick blenders, by the way. All right. That is that. And now I have quite a good quantity of yummy tomato pesto. And like I was saying earlier, you can put this on pasta, as many people do, but also you can freeze it and use it in any application where you want to spread something. When it cools off a little bit, it'll get even a little bit thicker. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I wasn't banking on my internet going out, unfortunately. It did. But we're going to real quick make some refrigerator pickles. So this is another nice feature. You can like take this apart. I love this thing. I have a couple of jars here. I have a couple jars here, and I have some pre-sliced, thank goodness, cucumbers. And I'm going to pack these cucumbers into the jars. Now, for refrigerator pickles, they do not have to be in glass mason jars like this. You can actually just put your brine right into a container and stick it in the fridge if you want to do that. but if you like to give away pickles, it's nice to have them in jars, because that's what people expect, I guess, from a pickle. So anyway, I have over here a little bit of water that I have melted some sugar into. These refrigerator pickles are not sweet pickles, but they're also not dill pickles. Dill pickles typically don't have any sugar associated with them at all. But sweet pickles tend to be really, really sweet, and I don't really like really, really sweet personally. That's just me. You can add more sugar if you like. But all this is just some water that I melted some sugar into, and this is all in the recipe. And then I'm going to add some cider vinegar to this to make my brine. And it's quite a bit of cider vinegar, about 3 cups of cider vinegar. And then I'm going to add garlic, because garlic makes a delicious pickle. And those are just whole garlic cloves that I peeled and I sliced in half. This is fresh dill. You can use dried dill. You don't have to use fresh dill. You don't have to use dill at all. If you don't like dill or you don't have dill, you can use some other fresh herb. You can try like throwing a rosemary sprig in your pickle if you want. But I happen to have lots of dill in my garden. These are bay leaves. Again, optional, but delicious if you happen to have bay leaves. About 10 bay leaves. If the sound hadn't already gone out when I was talking about coriander before, this is some homegrown coriander. You do not have to grow it yourself by any means, but I am a lazy gardener and I always let my cilantro go to seed, and then I end up with coriander, which is kind of nice. So a couple of teaspoons of that. And then I have to look at my recipe because there's so many ingredients. Salt. Salt is a very important ingredient in your pickle. We're going to use about 4 teaspoons of salt. That was kind of a heaping teaspoon, 2, 3, and then we'll go a little scant on the 4th one because the first one was a little much. And then you can also add other herbs. I like to add some peppercorns to my brine. Thank you. And some mustard seeds are also really good in a pickle brine. And I have measurements for all of these things in the recipe, but I like to really demonstrate that you don't have to follow the recipe exactly. And especially with refrigerator pickles. If you are going to be canning something and putting it on a shelf, not in a refrigerator, then you have to be a little more particular and precise. But since these are just going to get the brine poured over them and go into the refrigerator, they're great. The things that you need to be precise about are the cider vinegar and the water and the sugar and the salt ratio. And then any other herbs and spices, you can play with those. So then I'm going to give this a stir. And it looks real pretty with all of the herbs and garlic in it. And I'm going to pour some of my brine over my pickles and some of those yummy herbs, making sure that some of the herbs and bay leaves are getting down in there. And I also want to make sure that my pickles are completely covered in brine. So it's fine to sort of press them down. This particular jar is made for canning pickles because it's got a shoulder on it. See how it comes in like this? Some canning jars just go up straight, but the shoulder helps keep things under the brine liquid when you're making pickles. All right, so filling it all the way up to the top. And then I'm also just going to demonstrate that you can do the like super easy method where you've got your cucumbers already pre-sliced and you just pour that brine right on over there, stick it in the fridge just like that. That easy. So that is all for the recipes that I have for you all today. I hope that you were able to get something out of it. And if you have any questions at this point, please feel free to unmute yourself, and you can just make sure your video is turned off and you can say your question, or you can chat into the chat. You can also just email me if you have questions. I'll be emailing recipes. So feel free to shoot me an email and ask me questions. So it sounds like my sound is going in and out. Oh, I see a question that says, is there a secret to winnowing the coriander? Mine always has so many little stems in it. Yes, I actually learned this from the seed saving workshop that is recorded on our Bountiful Cities website. But the secret is to use a fan. And there's actually a demonstration of that in the seed saving workshop. But basically, you get the seeds off of the stems as best you can, and then you turn on a fan, like a box fan, and you have a big bowl underneath the box fan, and you slowly pour the seeds, and the stems blow, and the seeds drop. And you might have to experiment with that a little bit.
There's a question about how long you leave the pickles in the fridge.
Oh, that's a great question. So you want to leave the pickles for at least a day in the fridge before you taste them, because they really need to like absorb all of that juicy brine. They'll get better after a couple of days, but at least 1 day in the fridge is good. Any other questions? It looks like got lots of really sweet comments. And somebody was asking a question about what were the herbs and seasonings.
That's when we lost the video.
Oh, that was from when we lost the video. So I'll send you the recipe. You'll see it. So thank you all so much for sticking with me today, even though we had some technical difficulties. I really appreciate you being here, and please check out the Bountiful Cities website. If this recording actually happened, which we hope it did, it should be on the Bountiful Cities website. And also I'll post a link to the recipes on the website. So thank you very much.